Dr. Amanda with StraightSmile Solutions, StraightSmileSolutions.com. And today we're going to talk about the difference between putting bends in a wire or repoing a bracket. And these are both ways that orthodontists will do something called detailing or fine tuning the outcome, trying to get things perfect. So, theoretically speaking, if you're using something like indirect bonding, where you're putting things on through computer digitization, not all doctors use that. I mean, orthodontists are pretty darn good at placing brackets. We also have like thousands of hours of additional training from a general dentist, and we also spend 2.5 to 3 years of additional training learning how to do it right. So, a lot of orthodontists will do bends. They know what they're doing and they do it right. So, when you do bends for fine tuning, you do them usually at the end. I am an orthodontist, but I chose to do things a little bit different based on feedback I got and just what works for me. I find doing bends, I know how to do them. I'm decent at them. I'm probably not as decent as I used to be. I feel pretty comfortable doing step bends up and down for, like, let's say patient thought normally this tooth is supposed to be a little higher than these teeth, right? And then this one's supposed to be a little lower. So the tip of this should be like the tip of this, and this should be up. Some patients are kind of weird, you'll get to the end, they'll be like, even though that's the way it's supposed to be, I want all my teeth to be the same level. Can you just grind them all off? Well, no, we're not going to do that because your teeth are going to get sensitive. Well, can you bring this one down? And we're done. We get to the very end and they're like, I'm like, okay, In that kind of situation, I'm already in a big wire. If I go back and reposition the bracket higher to bring this down, I basically need another 6 months in treatment, 4 to 6 months in treatment, because I have to go back to a lighter, more flexible wire in order to do that, and then work my way up to close the space and make sure the torque is there and everything like that. It's a big waste of time. So in that kind of situation, I might do a bend to bring it down. However, unless you are an expert at placing bends, and I have yet to see a general dentist who's really good at it, what can happen if you place the bend incorrectly or kind of tilt the wire in the process, because you're using a stainless steel wire instead of a NiTi wire, is you can actually mess up the whole occlusion. You literally add a year to the treatment. So I highly encourage general dentists, pediatric dentists, and anyone that didn't go to orthodontic residency to not do bends. That is my suggestion. You don't need to learn to do them. It's a waste of time. You're actually going to make your cases worse. I have yet to see it work out for somebody. Best thing to do is to follow my protocol, which is not just mine. A lot of people use it, which is, first of all, use indirect bonding. Don't try to direct bond your brackets because you're not going to do it perfectly. And then you're going to get to this situation where you're either going to have to replace a bunch of brackets or you're going to have to do bends. So use digitized indirect bonding. Yes, it's going to cost a couple $100s per case, but it's also going to save you 6 months to a year, 2 years in each case. So there's a value to that too. And it's really not that expensive. The key to this, though, is there's a lot of services that are out there that say they do this, but unless they give you a digitized setup where you approve it, they're not doing it. Okay, you don't know a lot. I've taken a lot of tours of a lot of ortho labs, and I was horrified. I'm not going to name them at what I saw. I was like, oh, show me your indirect bonding. And it's just some technician, not even orthodontist, hand placing brackets on a model and doing a vacuum suck down over it. They don't know what they're doing any more than you know what you're doing. It's not digital. So you really want to make sure you're seeing that digital setup. There are definitely plenty of companies that are doing that, where they'll let you see the setup and you approve the setup, or you can make changes to the setup. Those are a great deal because it'll save you so much time. And just to tell you from the patient's perspective, it's really, really interesting because as I started getting into consulting and stepping away from clinical practice, I started seeing things from different light than I would as only an orthodontist, because a lot of times patients don't tell you stuff. They might tell the front desk stuff or make a comment under their breath, but you didn't really fully understand it. A lot of orthodontists take pride in their bends. Now, I have a Facebook group. It is only for consumers. I do let a few doctors on to help moderate. They are fully vetted by me. So for those of you who are trying to join my group and I'm rejecting you, if you're an orthodontist or a dentist, if you didn't ask me ahead of time, if I don't know who you are, I'm not going to let you in, because I don't know if you're there to troll, you're there to, steal patients, whatever. The patients don't want you there. So unless you're going to be helpful, and I want to make sure that our values sync up if you're going to be a moderator. So That's what that's about. But we have thousands of consumers that are in this almost like a chat, it's like a advice forum, where they, talk about ortho and questions they have about ortho. And one of the things that keeps coming up that sparked me to make this video was they hate the bends. Like, they hate them. Nobody likes them. No one thinks you're cool for doing them. And they get to the end and you don't do it right. Or they don't think you do it right, even if you do it right. And they're like, why are you wasting time twiddling with these bends? Just re-bracket. Why are you being cheap? They're looking at you doing this thinking that you're cheap. And also, the patients hate the way bends look. They think it looks ugly. They think it looks like, some of the words they use, they think it looks janky. Like, there's a lot worse words that I've seen used. But they think it looks bad. So just reposition the bracket when you're supposed to. Follow my sequence. My sequence is start with the biggest round wire that you can put in comfortably and fully ligate, whether it's a 14 or a 16, sometimes it's an 18, occasionally it's a 12, right? Every patient is different. There's no cookie cutter approach to this. The biggest possible one that you can fully engage. That means all the teeth are fully engaged, whether you have to use a ligature fork, you have to use a steel tie, you have to use a figure eight, I don't care what it is. If the wire isn't fully in the slot, you use the wrong wire. Go use the right wire, and make sure it's fully engaged. Then stick in that wire until it's passive. What does that mean? That means it's not active. The wire is flat, right? It's not like up and down and in and out like a snake. It's sitting, it looks like an arch, okay? Then you move up to the 18. Once you get to the 18, if you started there, that's where you finish. And it's passive. Then we take a full look everywhere, ups, downs, ins, outs, and make sure we love everything. This is where once you've done your part of that, and this is something I help doctors with, they'll send me the pictures and I'm like, oh, move this bracket, do this. Now, if you did indirect bonding, and if your brackets are right to begin with, there should be nothing that you have to do at this stage, unless it's like an aesthetic thing, like one of those little things where the patient says, I want this down, I want this up. It's just their personal preference. Sometimes you have some wear on some teeth and, you didn't really know what it was going to look like. And maybe the patient doesn't want the filling, wants to extrude the tooth and smooth it down instead. Fine. It's that kind of little stuff. So that's where at the 18 nighttime mark, you're going to reposition the brackets if needed. Then wait till that wire is passive. Then I always bring the patient into the conversation. I don't wait till the end. Matter of fact, I tell them that this is the time that they have their voice. I give them an appointment. I don't just do it on the spot in the office. I want to take the time and I want to document that we had this conversation, because honestly, if it happens at the end, like a lot of stuff, I'll be like, wait, we already had this conversation. So I say, I want you to take this next few weeks between appointments, show your friends, show your family, your straightening part of your treatment is done. We haven't closed all your spaces. We haven't fixed your bite, but we have straightened your teeth. That section we've done. And in straightening, there's a lot of art. We call this detailing. Some people call it Hollywooding, where I could make some changes, like there's not a wrong or a right. It's based on my interpretation, your friend's interpretation, Sometimes consumers have requests that we can't do, and I'll explain why. But if there's something that's bugging you, like an in and out or an up and down of the teeth, let me know now if you think this tooth's a little bit too high, this tooth's a little too low. I want to know, this is your voice, this is your time. After that, I'm on to the next stage, which is fixing the bite if needed and closing spaces if needed. So we finished the ups, downs, ins, and outs, and the verticals. So patient comes back, you give them a few weeks to talk about. I want their opinion. I want to encourage them to get their opinion. Matter of fact, I'm going to make them give an opinion. Some consumers will actually grab a signature at the stage. On that stage, you could just say, I am happy with the alignment of my teeth. I realize now we're moving on to the second stage, which is correcting the bite and closing spaces. Any other changes that I need to the alignment of teeth might result in additional time in treatment, which may or may not result in additional fees. You can put that in. I mean, I'm not saying I do that. I just do it verbally and document it. But if it's becoming a chronic problem in your practice, you might want to consider that. Because when you do this and you make it crystal clear that they had all the power to make changes at that point, they're not going to complain later. And do you know how much time that takes when you give them the power? Also, they think it's cool. I mean, to be honest, they like to ask their friends, what do you think? What do you think? And also what they often do is they'll take pictures, put it on their Instagram, and encourage them to, hey, put it on your Instagram. I want you to put it on my Instagram, because there's nothing I hate more is when a patient finishes, posts, hey, I finished my ortho, and they're like, ooh, that doesn't look good. You know what? Hey, my doctor's looking for opinions. We're halfway done. What do you think so far? shoot, let them hashtag your practice, let them, tag your practice. You might very well get so many patients from this step, just this friendly, open communication step, that, this kind of midpoint in your treatment. It might actually grow your practice. It's a brilliant idea to encourage them to post pictures if they're like a social savvy, social media kind of person. Great thing. Your patients feel like they're in control. They realize what's next. They know what they're doing next. When am I getting elastics? When am I getting bigger wires? When are you going to close this gap? So, yeah, sure. That happens in the second stage of treatment. So anyways, hopefully this was a more clarifying kind of video. I know some of you are getting really confused. And hey, you should have a set of stainless steel wires because sometimes I do use them, especially if there's transverse issues. I like to have them. Not everyone gets them. So, but you should definitely have it. But this will really cut down on, first of all, the amount of pliers that you have to buy. You know how much money those pop pliers are, those Z pliers are? I mean, they're a couple $100 each. And there's different, gauges and dimensions. I mean, you're going to save thousands in your armamentarium if you eliminate this step. Not to mention tons of time on your cases, and you're going to have happier patients. And it's way less chair time because this kind of stuff is only doctor time. When you do ortho right, it's really mostly assistant time. If you do it right. If you do it wrong, it's lots of doctor time. Yeah, if you love making step bends, then okay. Some people find it really, really cathartic. They love it. No thanks to me. It hurts my fingers, and it's very tedious, and I was never one that loved doing it. So, but whatever. Anyways, hopefully this is helpful. Have a good one.